Along with model view controller functionality, another methodology provided by ColdBox is event-driven programming. It's not an either-or thing where you have to pick between MVC and event-driven stuff. Your ColdBox app will pretty much always be an MVC app, but in addition to that, you can use this concept of events in your code for some additional benefits. The idea with event-driven programming is pretty similar to what we've probably already seen before in JavaScript. In the JavaScript world, you've got these pieces of code like onClick, onMouseOver, onLoad, and so on. The code in the onClick section, for example, doesn't run until someone clicks the given item. That click is a message to the app. The click message gets broadcasted, and then any code listening for that click will intercept it and run the corresponding code. The same concept is true with those other JavaScript concepts I mentioned, onMouseOver, onLoad, onSubmit, and so on. Those are all interceptors waiting for a message that may or may not be broadcasted by the application. Well, ColdBox also has this concept of interceptors, and it works the same way. Instead of things like onClick and onMouseOver, because those are client-side events, ColdBox has its own internal events that can be intercepted. ColdBox intercepts things that are server-side items. Some examples would be when an error message occurs in the app. The on-error interceptor might be triggered, or maybe something more specific to your app, like when new messages are saved into the system, or when a new user is created, when a new user logs in, that sort of thing. This concept of those messages or events being broadcasted and the corresponding code that listens to those events is what we call event-driven programming. Interceptors are CFC listeners that react to incoming events. Events can be announced by the core framework, ColdBox itself, or they can be custom events from your application's code. Here's an example of what an interceptor would look like. It's just another CFC in your application. It extends this interceptor base class, and that's what makes the CFC an interceptor. The listeners are special functions inside those interceptor CFCs. The part that makes them special is just the naming convention we use for when we create them. You made the listener with the same name as whatever you're listening for. For example, the onError method we see here is listening for the onError event, so they're named the same. That's how ColdBox knows which events are being listened for and where to send those events. In that onError code example we just saw, the CFC was extending ColdBox.system.interceptor. We can see that class here in the UML diagram. It inherits from the framework supertype, which we already know is part of the ColdBox core engine and where a lot of the functionality comes from. So we extend this system interceptor class, and that gives our CFC all the interceptor functionality. We just have to write our listener to start using it. And we'll see some examples of those later on in a video. But really that's it. Interceptors are just CFCs with functions in them. And if the event with the same name as our function is broadcasted, then our function runs. Just like in JavaScript, onClick is our listener. And if the corresponding button or whatever is clicked, then our onClick listener will intercept that click and do something with it. Interceptors are along the same lines as the observer design pattern, which you may have heard about before. You can learn more about observers and interceptors at the links here on your screen. Another great resource for observers and other design patterns is this book, Head First Design Patterns. The code examples in it are Java, but the examples in it are some of the easiest to understand that I've ever come across. I often reference this book when teaching classes about design patterns and object-oriented programming. And of course, there is more information on interceptors at the ColdBox website, coldbox.ortusbooks.com.